This is how Jin Ping Mei is read, the embroidery version. Chapter 3. The king's mother-in-law is determined to take bribes, and a trap is set to pick up the prodigal son privately. What does exposure mean? Stealing king love also. Wang Po, this old woman who has been fooling around all her life, is a genius this time. If used in contemporary times, she can almost compete for the Oscar for Best Screenplay. She started with 5 things about Pan Donkey and Deng Xiaoxian and then added 1 thing. Then to the very light. A few if it's him, a few just stop, a few no. Until the last minute complete, well-organized and well-proportioned. However, there is a writing dilemma here. Wang Po has revealed her plan in detail, and even the details have been arranged properly, and then the story does happen exactly according to the plan. In other words, the reader has basically read the same story twice. Write it like this. Okay. The description of the strategy that ordinary readers are familiar with is this. Kong Ming summoned a certain general to whisper a few words in secret, or even just said that the military advisor planned this. And as a result, an army stood out at a certain time and place in the actual battle. I have been here under the orders of the military advisor. We'll be waiting for you for a long time. The enemy soldiers were so scared that they pissed themselves off and fled in a hurry. And the readers exclaimed with surprise, "Isn't this bitter?" In fact, this involves the issue of suspense writing. We use the metaphor of laying landmines. The first type is that the reader knows that someone may have done something, but does not know what will happen. When the explosion occurs, he has no choice but to accept a shock. In other words, if the psychological position of the 3 kingdoms readers is opposite to Kong Ming, then this is nothing short of a horror movie. In the second type, readers watch the mines being ranged, knowing that sooner or later they will explode or be destroyed. But the main characters do not know it. They will become more and more dangerous as the time limit approaches. At this time, all the readers' hearts are hanging on there. There is suspense. In other words, the explosion that is crucial to the development of the plot always exists subjectively. No matter where the reader stands, the explosion is always a suspense film. Back to the story, Pan Jinlian knew nothing about Mrs. Wang's design or her destiny in life, but the readers watched her fall deeply into the trap designed by others, pursuing her own destiny. New fun in life. Perhaps only in this way can readers remain neutral in the suspense, show mercy to the characters in the inevitable fate, and understand Pan Jinlian's post-marital infidelity that originally seemed unforgivable. Of course, all these wonderful things are original to Water Margin, and Jin Ping Mei does not dare to take credit. The charm of Jin Ping Mei, especially the embroidered version, lies in the technical sublimation of the storytelling in terms of logic and details. Let's first look at a 7-character poem from Sihuabin. Men and women have never been at the same table. And the most pitiable thing is to be flirtatious. Not only Wenjin ran to Sima, but Simon also met Jinlian. There is no doubt that this limerick is terrible. Wenjin bends to Sima is about Sima Xiangru's challenge to Zhuo Wenjin. Not to mention that Simon King and Pan Jinlian are far different from these 2 people. Even the story itself cannot be compared. Wenjin bends to Sima itself contains strong, although Simon's encounter with Jinlian should be attributed to Pan Jinlian's pretending to be flirtatious. It is somewhat unfair. Even more problematic is the sentence at the beginning. Men and women have never sat at separate tables. Since ancient times in China, men and women have not sat at the same table since the age of 7. The Compendium of Chinese Etiquette and Customs states how to distinguish between men and women. For example, men and women sit on different seats, do not share towels, and even uncles and sisters do not understand each other and do not agree with each other. If you use etiquette to distinguish suspicion, use this etiquette to ensure that you can distinguish it. Do you understand? Men and women sit in different seats, and uncles and sisters-in-law do not know each other. So in Musang, the inviolable celestial being in Water Margin descends to become a mortal uncle, with 7 emotions, and 6 desires in the plum and the golden ping, when he bows his head shyly. When he adopts a tacit attitude towards the subsequent teasing and seduction, we have a reason to argue. It is not all my fault that men and women sit together. uncles and sisters sit together at the same table. And halfway through the walk, when Wang Po-na touched her face in a daze, although she didn't refuse, she didn't take the initiative either. So how could you blame me when we were sitting together drinking tea? In other words, the original intention of Water Margin was to write about Pan Jinlian as a prostitute. The storybook Jin Ping Mei strives to write the story of the male and female protagonist's affair, but it still has a bit of market tack. And the portrait version is more literary. It attempts to interpret an affair story that is more in line with the logic of life through Pan Jinlian's modern 3-no spirit of not taking the initiative, not refusing, and not being responsible. So it decisively deleted this incomprehensible poem. Deleting the tacky poem will make it more literary. We emphasize logic because the first time we met Simon King's Pan Jinlian was in Wang Po's tea shop, which was completely different from seducing Wu Song at home. At least the latter is a home game, at home, with acquaintances. The former is an away game, away from home, with strangers. In the away game, she is not a concubine, so she cannot speak loudly. Nor is she a prostitute, so she cannot straighten her back and speak. Even if she has the desire to have an affair, she can only be conservative and waiting, and cannot quickly sink into a completely active adulteress. The embroidery book follows this logic to transform the story in Water Margin and carefully designs an expressive action as a decoding of the character's personality. This expressive action is lowering the head from unconsciousness in Water Margin to active description in the storybook, and then to extreme portrayal in the portrait book. It formed one of Pan Jinlian's signature actions, showing that the rewriter of the portrait book of originality. Let us carefully compare the descriptions of Boeing in the texts of these 3 stories, and slowly understand the vivid charm in them. The first time, Simon King watched helplessly as the woman was making clothes in the room. Seeing Simon King coming over, he lowered his head. Both the embroidery portrait book and the poetry book included in the embroidery portrait book, Maisie. The second time, Simon King picked up the clothes and looked at them, cheering. The woman lowered her head and smiled and said, "Officials should stop joking." Exclusive to the embroidered portrait book. The third time, Simon King said, "It was the one who beat me with the pole at the door that day. I wonder who married my wife." The woman lowered her head and said with a smile, "Embroidered portrait book unique. The eyebrows are criticized for being extremely evil." Zhang Zhupo criticizes, "It is wonderful to describe a woman with a heart." The fourth time, the mother-in-law only praised Simon King and made false noises, so the woman lowered her head and sewed. Water Margin, poetry and embroidery books are available. The fifth time, Simon King's eyes were always looking at the woman. The woman also glanced at Simon King, then lowered her head to go about her life. All 3, Zhang Zhupo commented, "Very well written, like fire and brocade." The sixth time, Simon King asked. The villain dare not ask, "How young is the lady?" The woman lowered her head and replied, 25 years old. Exclusive to the embroidered portrait. The seventh time, the woman thanked her and stood up. When she looked at the pink head, she had drunk 3 minutes of wine and her heart was full of love. She also said 2 words with meaning. She only lowered her head and did not get up. Both of the 3, Zhang Zhupo commented, "The last paragraph is a good writing force." What's the beauty of bowing your head? First, the head is lowered, avoiding eye contact between the 2 parties expressing a shy emotion. Secondly, the head is lowered, the posture is lowered, and the tone of voice may also be lowered, in a passive position, which is in line with the real situation of the character. Thirdly, when you lower your head, there will be a time when you raise it. The moment you raise your head, where the eyes meet, there will inevitably be no emotion. Take the 6th bowing of the head as an example. This is not found in Water Margin or the poetry book, and the answers about age are also different. From these different expressions, we can easily discover the sophistication of literary thought. Water Margin. The slave family spent 23 years in vain. The original version of the poem, the slave family has wasted 25 years old. Those born in the year of the dragon will be born on the 9th day of the 1st lunar month, when they are ugly. Embroidered portrait, 25 years old. Regarding the wasted time, the ingenuity of water margin obviously lies in Wusong. Jin Shengdan pointed out that it is exactly what the uncle said to his sister-in-law. The original version of the poem retains this wasted time, but there seems to be more nonsense. When a strange man and woman meet for the first time, even though it is impossible for a prostitute to tell the birth date and birth date in detail immediately, and even a blind date is only within the scope of the matchmaker's work. The rewriter of the portrait version cleverly deleted these redundancies, leaving the briefest expression. The woman bowed her head and replied, 25 years old. How could Pan Jinlian agree to waste? Do you still remember how old Pan Jinlian was when she was sold to Wang Zhaoxuan's mansion? And how old was she when she lost her virginity? How did he grow up to the age of 18? And what kind of 7 years did it take for Zhang Die's family and Wu Daling's family to go from 18 to 25? We can imagine how much sadness, shyness, excitement, and nervousness she felt at the moment she lowered her head. The most gentle thing is the gentleness of the lowered head, like the shyness of a water lotus that cannot bear the cool breeze, Zuzimo said. These 7 bows of the head lead to the first official meeting between the male and female protagonists in the story, the Plum and the Golden Ping, and the most famous affair story of an adulterer and an adulterer in the history of literature. The first time should be attributed to the original version of Jin Ping Mei, and the last time should be attributed to the original version of Water Margin. However, the greatest credit should go to the embroidered version. The deliberate and original 3 bows are really appropriate, especially the first one. 3 strong expressions of lowering my head especially. The unique and distinct impression finally left a mark on the reader's hearts. Hundreds of years later, the great writer Zhang Ailing described the white tassel in Love in a Fallen City, learning the taste of lowering the head without reservation, and writing with great affection.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.